Hey everybody, VR Gaming Fan here. Had some experience with the Vive for a while, myself, Sprite, some friends, and I thought I would compile a list of gripes and groans, issues that we've had, improvements that could be made, things like that. Overall, our impression, all of us, everyone who's tried it, our impression of it is it's mind-blowing, it's amazing, it's game-changing. But especially given the fact that it's a new product. This is their first attempt at a commercial product in this area. Some improvements could be made. Obviously, like the resolution could be better and things like that. And those things will improve in future generations. But also just little nitpicky things. Hardware-wise and software-wise that I thought I'd address. So first up is the head strap. It's not so much that there's a problem with the head strap, it's that there's no instructions on how to properly adjust the head strap. And so ourselves for the first day, and a lot of people that I've seen online, they have the head strap set wrong. There should be more detailed instructions, maybe even an instructional video on how to properly adjust the head strap for maximum comfort. Also, we discovered a handy technique for putting the headset on and off, especially if you're wearing glasses. What you do is you leave the top strap adjusted for the proper length, right? So when you're doing your initial setting of the head strap, all the head straps, you go with a maximum length for the top head strap, put the unit on your face, put the back of the head strap cupping the back of your skull, and then you tighten up the top head strap and then the side head straps. Get everything properly adjusted. Then, when taking the unit off and putting it back on again, what you do is release the side head straps, which completely releases the unit from your face. But the measurements, the adjustments for the fit haven't been thrown off, because primarily that's the top strap that determines that. So what that allows you to do is, rather than trying to squeeze it over your face by pulling on the tension of the straps and giving yourself very little room, and sometimes you bump your glasses and things like that, you just pop off those side straps, the whole thing swings right off your face nice and easy, and then when you put it back on, you put the strap in the proper position at the back of your head, lower the unit over your face, and then a quick pull on the side straps to a comfortable pressure, and then just tap them to the sides of your head because it's just Velcro, and then you're good to go. So it's a really easy, convenient way to take the unit off, put it back on again, and also at the same time adjusting the tension of the straps so that it fits your face and head as opposed to the last person who wore it. So that works very well. I highly recommend that technique for people who are using the Vive. It's a lot easier to get it on and off that way, especially if you're wearing glasses. Now, the lighthouses. The lighthouses have a few issues. In general, they work great. Very accurate tracking over a fairly wide area. They don't need adjustment or anything, unless, of course, you're changing areas or whatnot. But they do have a couple of minor issues. One, sometimes when you have the Steam VR software set to turn them off and then turn them back on again, sometimes they don't turn back on again, in which case you have to go and unplug them from the wall, plug them back in again, and then they come back on. Doesn't happen all that often, but it is annoying when it happens. Certainly not a deal breaker by any means. I mean, they do function. It's just occasionally they don't turn on via the wireless signal that's supposed to turn them on. When they do turn on, though, they're slow to turn on. They'll take like a minute to come on. So you start up the Steam VR software, and then you sit and you wait for like a full minute before the little indicator lights on your monitor, little indicator graphics, show that they've come online. And then you can turn on the hand units and proceed to do whatever. So I mean, it's probably because like the motors inside them need to spin up or whatever, but it is slow. I mean, the grand scheme of things, a minute isn't all that much, but it is a little annoying. One issue I have with the synchronization of the lighthouses is the lighthouse is always trying to establish a visual synchronization with each other, even if you have the sync cable connected. So what happens is, if they're close enough to each other that they have visual sync, then you don't even need the sync cable. If they're so far away from each other that they can't ever have a visual sync, then you need to use the sync cable, and it just uses a sync cable. The problem is, and this is what we have in our environment, they're just far enough away from each other that sometimes they have a visual sync, and sometimes they don't. But because they default to a visual sync first, even if the sync cable is attached, what happens is you'll be in a game playing, and then suddenly the screen goes blank, because that's how the software deals with a loss of tracking. Rather than what the Rift does, where you'll just space out, and what you're seeing will like jar, will drift, will do whatever, which makes you nauseous as hell, and can also cause you to fall over. What the Vive does is it simply blanks the display when it loses tracking of the headset until it gets tracking back, and then the display goes back to normal. So what ends up happening is sometimes, not all that often, but sometimes, because our base stations are in this in-between zone where sometimes they can see each other and sometimes they can't, and because the way the software is set, I mean, they could fix this with a patch, firmware update, or a patch to Steam VR, whatnot. They could change this, so this isn't like a permanent, burned into the hardware, can't ever be changed problem. But they'll synchronize visually if they can, and then you'll be in the middle of a game, they'll lose their visual synchronization and fail over to the sync cable, so they'll regain synchronization and you'll get tracking back, but your screen will blank out for, I don't know, 10, 20 seconds, and it's annoying. If our base stations were further apart, then it wouldn't be a problem. If they were closer together, it wouldn't be a problem. But we're just in this middle area where it matters whether or not it's trying to synchronize visually or by cable. So again, that's a problem. It's fixable, and it's annoying, and most people aren't going to run into it. For the earbuds that come included are high quality. They have excellent sound quality. From people that own both Rift and Vive who have compared the two, they say the sound quality for the earbuds is slightly better than the sound quality for the over-the-ear headphones that come with the Rift. But there is a significant flaw in the earbuds, in that the cord that they come with is way too short. And frequently, when turning your head, you will pull one of the earbuds out of your ear. Now, this is easily correctable by either using different headphones or simply getting a short audio extension cable so that the cable is longer and then they don't get pulled out of your ears. But it's just such a simple thing that they could have made the cable a little bit longer and there wouldn't have been a problem. Again, not a deal breaker. It's fixable. It's just an annoyance. The breakout box by default uses an HDMI port, comes with an HDMI cord, goes to the HDMI port on your video card. But it has a mini display port on the breakout box. Doesn't come with a mini display port cord. I purchased a mini display port cord because I want to use the HDMI port for a second monitor. So I got the cord and I tried it and I can't get it to work. And I looked online, and one, there's no support from Steam or HTC or anybody on using the mini display port. And many people in the forums have discussed having problems using that port. Some people get it to work, some people don't. I haven't gotten it to work. I've ordered some adapters that I'm going to try playing around with, but as it currently stands, I can't use the display port. Not a huge deal. Again, most people, they're just going to use the included HDMI, and that's it. But again, it's an annoyance. Something I've addressed before, and many people have talked about when it comes to VR headsets in general, not just the Vive, but VR headsets in general, is sweat. You sweat on the pads get gross. your sweat eats away at the pads get destroyed. I strongly recommend to anyone, doesn't matter which VR headset you're using, get a cover, a cloth cover or a leather cover or whatnot to go over those pads to keep them from soaking up your sweat and becoming absolutely disgusting, and from being destroyed by eaten away by the oils and such in your skin. The wrist strap, the safety wrist straps that come with the handsets, the motion controllers, are really poor quality. Just like when the Wii first came out, there were all kinds of problems with the wrist straps breaking. Same thing here. The quality of the wrist straps is terrible. They break very easily. First thing I did before I even set up the Vive, I took the controllers out of the box, I removed the wrist straps that it came with, and I replaced it with my Wiimote wrist straps, which are much stronger. I strongly recommend replacing your wrist straps right away, not relying on them, because if you rely on them and then you accidentally throw a controller, there's a very good chance that the wrist strap will break and your controller is going to go flying. Steam VR, at least for me, right now, is pretty glitchy. And so I don't know if I'd say frequent crashes, but crashes do happen. One actually frequent problem that I have is a lot of the times when I launch Steam VR, you're supposed to be able to bring up, from within virtual reality, bring up Steam, a graphical version of Steam on your screen and select your apps and do whatever from within virtual reality. Frequently, about, I don't know, a third of the time, that functionality doesn't work. And so I can still launch Steam on my Windows desktop and launch VR games from there and go into the VR games and they'll work just fine. But I can't do it from within the virtual environment. Some kind of crash happens with the software that communicates between Steam VR and Steam. Generally, rebooting my computer will clear up the problem, but it is annoying and it happens fairly regularly. Also, not as regularly, but it does happen occasionally, is the lab will crash, especially when trying to load up the robot repair simulator, whatever it's called. Now, because that's not a game, it's just this interactive demo. It's not something you load up all that often. Generally, it's when you get somebody new over and you want to show it off. That isn't originally part of the lab. One thing you'll notice is with all the other things that you load up from the lab, you stay within the lab software. But when you load up the robot repair demo, the lab shuts down. The robot repair launches. And then when you leave the robot repair, it shuts down and the lab relaunches. So it's actually a separate program. And clearly the integration between those is a little on the wonky side. So frequently I can't get into the robot repair, but we don't often go into the robot repair, so not that big a deal. As far as other parts of the lab, occasionally there's a crash during a load screen, but it's pretty rare. Really the only problem one is the robot repair. As far as other games, I can't recall off the top of my head any of the other games crashing. Maybe it happened once. I can't recall. It's disappointing that the lab, which is their premier demo software for the Vive, comes included with the Vive. It's nice and polished and and everything. It's the one that experiences the crashes, whereas the sometimes very crappy third-party indie dev games, they never or almost never crash, for me anyway. One thing I wanted to address was the price, and this one I don't consider a negative, and it's not a complaint. A lot of people complain about the price, but when you think about it, a smartphone, a TV, or any piece of high-end gaming gear or high-end PC gear period is going to cost you somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 to $1,000, and in many cases for some of those things they cost more. So it's pretty much in line with what you would spend if you were getting a high-end graphics card or a high-end gaming monitor, or you're doing a triple monitor setup with lower-end monitors, or a smartphone, or you wanted to get a really fast CPU and liquid cooling and all that stuff. Anytime you go into high-end gaming, which VR is definitely high-end gaming, this is the kind of money you expect to spend. So for people that are into high-end gaming, hardcore gaming, they're used to spending this kind of money. So no, it's not expensive. It's right on par with everything else. As far as the display goes, obviously resolution is going to improve in the future. The resolution is sufficient for immersion, but the resolution becomes an issue when you're trying to see detail at a distance, or if you're trying to read small text. It can become a problem. Now, as far as the difference between the display on the Vive and the display on the Rift, basically the displays are the same. What's different is the lenses. And the lenses are designed for different pros and cons. Basically, there was only so far they could push the technology, and cuts had to be made in some areas in order to have advances in other areas. And HTC and Oculus decided to go in different directions with this. Neither one is necessarily right or wrong. They just have different goals. Remember that the Vive is focused on a stand-up, moving around, immersive as possible experience. And so their goal was to maximize immersion. Whereas the Rift, their goal was a sit-down experience, primarily flight sims, space sims, driving sims, things like that. So immersion isn't as much of a factor. The lenses they use for the Rift don't stretch out the display as much. So you get less of a screen door effect because the pixels aren't stretched as much. It's easier to see distance detail, and it's easier to see fine text. What the trade-off is it's less immersive because you have a smaller field of view. You can see all of the edges of the screen. So it's more like looking at a movie screen as opposed to being completely immersed. But it has the advantage of, if you've got to look down at text and detailed controls in a cockpit, or you need to see a lot of detail in the distance, things like that. The Vive's lenses, again, the displays are basically the same. The Vive's lenses lend themselves better to that. Or sorry, the Rift's lenses. The Vive's lenses, they lend themselves to immersion. Less focus on detail and more focus on just completely being immersed. So it stretches the display out, so you have a greater field of view that completely covers your entire field of view, so you feel completely immersed. You feel like you are in this world. A world that small text is hard to read, and there isn't as much detail in very distant objects, but when you're immersed, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, unless you're really trying to focus on some detail for some reason, in which case you're going to notice. The overall feeling of immersion is the goal, and the overall feeling of immersion is accomplished. And when you're in that feeling of immersion, you don't notice the little details. Your brain just takes it all in, believes it, and carries on. So in that regard, basically both companies had a different goal in mind. Both companies modeled their lenses to pursue that goal, and both companies did as much as they could with the technology currently available to achieve those goals. So in that regard, neither headset is really inferior or superior, except if you're talking about a specific application. For sit-down sim games, the Rift is superior. For stand-up immersive games, games where the purpose of it is to make you feel like you are part of the experience, then the Vive is definitely the superior product. If you're planning on going back and forth between the two of them, well, then I guess it'd be the Vive, because the stand-up experience just isn't really a reasonable option for the Rift. But I mean, obviously, if you own both headsets, you would switch back and forth depending on what type of game you're playing. Yeah, for people that are really, really, really picky about display quality and everything, and they're looking for things to nitpick about, they're going to nitpick detail, focus, being able to read small text, things like that. They're going to nitpick that with the Vive. Whereas with the Rift, what they're going to nitpick is a lack of immersion, a lack of field of view, that light leak around the nose that also interferes with immersion. Also, a difference between the two displays is the display on the Vive is brighter. And for some people, that's a big deal. For other people, it doesn't really matter to them one way or another. But that is another difference between the two displays, is for whatever reason, Vive's display is brighter. The microphone that's embedded in the headset is not great quality. We've used it on our most recent recordings when we're playing VR, the Surgeon Simulator, and when I was playing Zortex. So you can hear what it sounds like. Also, well, actually, we also used it for budget cuts. But in budget cuts, we hadn't solved the other problem, in that because it's right there, right above your mouth, you get wind blast. It needs a pop filter. Now, we solved the problem very simply. You just put a little piece of masking tape over it, and that takes care of the problem entirely. It's a very easy fix. But again, it was a very simple thing that they could have avoided in the design. Just a little piece of foam or whatever covering that hole to prevent that air blast. Because, one, when you're using it for recording, it sounds like crap. And two, if you're using it to do voice commands, it messes up the voice commands, so the voice recognition doesn't work. It's a simple little design flaw that could have easily been corrected. One major issue I have is that the batteries in the tracking controllers are not replaceable. No battery lasts forever. At some point, those batteries are going to deteriorate to the point where the controllers are useless. Now, probably somebody will have some aftermarket whatever, but it does mean that you've got to break open those controllers in order to replace the battery. The battery should have been easily accessible through a normal battery door, and the battery should be some kind of industry standard battery that you could go down to Best Buy or wherever, any electronics store, and be able to pick up replacements. Because when you spend a significant amount of money on a product, you want that product to last. I don't buy cell phones that don't have replaceable batteries, and that was a mistake that Samsung made for a little while. Is they stopped. It was one of the big reasons why I was such a fan of Samsung phones. Is all of them had upgradable memory, and all of them had swappable batteries and everything. And for like 1 or 2 generations of their phones, they stopped doing that. I won't buy those phones. I won't buy a tablet because tablets don't have replaceable batteries, which is insane to me considering all laptops do. But when the laptop doesn't have a keyboard, suddenly you can't replace the battery. It's ridiculous. So for me, that is a major pet peeve. That is generally a deal breaker for me. Had I any other option, I would have gone with a different option. That is a major design flaw as far as I'm concerned, is not being able to replace the batteries in the motion controllers. As far as a software limitation, and again, they could add this in future updates, and I hope that they do, is the chaperone system, although is excellent for letting you know if you're approaching the horizontal bounds of your play space. So if you're about to hit the wall, the couch, whatever's around you. But it doesn't warn you about the floor or the ceiling. Now you may think, well, the floor, why do you need a warning about the floor? You know where the floor is. No, you don't. You can, if you check out Tested, Jeremy from Tested was playing Budget Cuts in the Vive, and he was up inside the ceiling, and he tried to look down through a hole in the ceiling down into the room below him, and he smacked his face into the floor, because you don't remember that the real world is out there. You are completely immersed and completely convinced of your environment, and when you see a hole in the floor, you think it's a real hole in the floor, and you will try and stick your hand through it, you will try and stick your head through it, and you will smack into the floor. There should be a warning when the controllers and or headset approach the floor. And the same thing for the ceiling. There is no warning, no measurement whatsoever for the ceiling. The system has no idea how high your ceiling is. And we had someone over yesterday who was using the Vive, and he tried to jump up and hit something above his head, and he smacked the controller into the ceiling. Now, luckily, our ceiling is high enough that as long as you don't jump, you can swing over your head as much as you want. So in future, we will have to tell everyone who comes over to use the Vive, do not, under any circumstances, jump. But again, that is something, there should be some kind of mechanism in the chaperone system to prevent you from hitting the ceiling. Again, not a deal breaker, and it's not like necessarily a permanent problem. They could add the functionality, at any time in the future, but it is a flaw. It's something that should be addressed. And that's basically about it. Sprite and I did a short brainstorming session trying to come up with problems or issues we had with the Vive. And as I mentioned, obviously in future generations, the resolution of the display is going to get better, and yada yada yada. But as far as what is currently possible with technology as it stands right now, those are really our only complaints about them, and most of them are correctable. In many cases, very easily correctable. So overall, we are very happy with the Vive. All the people who have come over and tried it, they've all been blown away. They think it's just awesome. Definitely worth the money we spent on it, and we plan on getting a lot more use out of it. But for those who either don't have a Vive yet, maybe they have one on the way or whatever, or maybe you have one, you've encountered one of these problems, and you didn't think of the solution that we thought of for it. So maybe you'll find these helpful. I'm still waiting for my VR cover to arrive. I ordered it like 2 months ago. They did finally ship it. After a month and 3 weeks, they finally shipped it out. But it's another 2 to 3 weeks shipping, because it comes from Korea or somewhere like that. So basically, they're getting more orders than they can handle. So they haven't arrived yet. We're very much looking forward to those arriving. I've been holding off on some of the more intensive games, like Space Pirate Trainer and Hollow Point and stuff like that, the ones that really make you sweat. I've been holding off on trying those until the VR covers arrive, because I don't want to ruin the foam pads. So we've been keeping our play sessions short. We've been sticking with low-impact games. And we still sweat a little bit. A little bit gets on the pads, but not to the point where it gets soaked. And it's just because we're too impatient to wait until the VR covers arrive while the Vive just sits there and gathers dust. So the sacrifice that we had to make. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. A few little foibles and glitches and things that you have to deal with, most of them correctable, but overall, an absolutely amazing experience. And I'll be getting right back into it as soon as I finish here. See you next time.